If you are brave, watch this story until the end. Reality of life #Stoicism #story. Camillo's leap. Camillo had always been a young man with an energy that was hard to describe. He was 24 years old. He lived in a small rented apartment and worked at a cafe waiting tables, serving espresso after espresso, dreaming of something bigger than his routine. He had no money, no important connections, but he had a strange mix of inner strength and a soft voice that whispered in his ear, "You can do it, but first you must learn to master yourself." It was a phrase he had read in a book on Stoicism that he found by accident in a public library. An old yellowed book that someone had forgotten, but that changed the way he saw the world. The words of Epictetus, Seneca, and Marcus Aurelius became his nightly refuge after long days of work. One day, while resting in his small room, he saw an announcement for a new reality show, a 4-month program where participants would face physical tests, emotional challenges, and extreme coexistence. The winner would receive a large prize, but beyond the money, the exposure, the platform, and the personal transformation were what truly attracted Camillo. "I want to test myself. I want to prove what I'm made of," he said softly. But immediately, like a shadow that had followed him since childhood, an inner voice told him he wasn't enough, that he had never stood out, that nobody knew him, that he was a nobody. Camillo took a deep breath and remembered a teaching he always wrote in his notebook. "The man who conquers himself is more powerful than one who conquers cities." And with that phrase trembling in his chest, he decided to sign up. The selection process was tough. Thousands of people applied, many with experience, with money to invest in professional auditions. Camillo arrived wearing a simple shirt, worn-out jeans, and a heart full of nerves. When the judges asked him why he wanted to enter, he answered with brutal honesty, "Because I want to learn to master my mind. Because I want to face myself. Because I want to prove that discipline and character are worth more than any fame." That day, for some mysterious reason, they chose him. From the first night in the reality house, Camillo felt the weight of living together. The participants were full of egos, a hunger for attention, strategies, and pride. Some looked down on him. "And who is this guy?" they whispered. "A waiter, seriously?" He heard them, but he didn't respond. "What doesn't depend on me cannot affect me," he repeated mentally like a Stoic prayer that grew stronger with every attack. The first weeks were hell. They slept little, ate even less, and the physical competitions were brutal. Camillo, who did not come from the world of sports, suffered through every challenge, but he always finished. There was something inside him that, even when his body was breaking, would not allow his spirit to surrender. One night, completely exhausted, muscles shaking and eyes red, he sat in the patio of the house. There, under a dim light, he remembered another phrase he had underlined in his book: "Do not pray for an easy life. Pray for the strength to endure a difficult one." That thought was like a new fire, and from that day on, he began to transform. His teammates started to notice. Camillo was no longer the silent guy who endured insults. Now he was someone who spoke little, but whose presence commanded respect. When heated arguments broke out, he was the only one who didn't respond impulsively. When others grew desperate over food, sleep, or stress, he breathed deeply and kept going. It wasn't indifference, it was self-control. And that self-control began to irritate people. First a few, then many. There was a participant named Matteo, competitive, proud, accustomed to winning. From day one, Matteo felt rejection toward Camillo. He couldn't stand that someone he considered inferior showed such mental strength. So he began to provoke him, to target him, to attack him verbally. "You're weak. Nobody knows you. You won't get far." Camillo looked at him calmly. "I don't need to prove anything to you," he said softly. Those kinds of responses enraged Matteo. But Camillo knew the real battle was internal. The fight against his own ego, against his own reactivity. The challenges advanced, each one more demanding than the last. There was one where participants had to spend hours under freezing rain while solving mental puzzles. Many broke down screaming in frustration. Others quit. Camillo remained silent, breathing, focused on the only thing he could control, his mind. He visualized a fire inside him, a fire the rain could not extinguish. When the challenge ended, exhausted but steady, he began to stand out among everyone. That night, as he entered the house soaked, one of the reality trainers watched him closely and said, "I don't know what you're doing, but your mind is stronger than your body." Camillo simply smiled and replied, "I don't fight the rain, I fight my own thoughts." That phrase spread among the production team. The audience began to notice him, to connect with him. His calm became an attractive mystery. They started calling him the Silent One, the Mentalist, the Stoic. But inside the house, Camillo's calm generated even deeper conflicts. Some people began to conspire to get him out. They saw him as a threat. They invented rumors, blamed him in group challenges, isolated him at key moments. Camillo endured it all with a serenity that seemed almost supernatural. But there were nights when he cried in silence, not out of fear of them, but out of fear of failing himself. "If I don't master my emotions, how can I say I walk the path of Stoicism?" he repeated over and over. And it was on one of those nights that the situation exploded. During a coexistence challenge, a group of participants verbally ambushed him, accusing him of emotional manipulation because of his silence, calling him a hypocrite, fake, cold. Matteo, his main enemy, shouted inches from his face. Camillo felt his heart burn. He felt rage rise up his throat. For a second, he was about to respond, to explode, to let out all the contained frustration. But in that moment, he remembered a phrase by Marcus Aurelius that had saved him several times. "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." He breathed 3 times and, with the calmest voice he could gather, replied, "I'm not going to become someone I don't want to be." The house fell silent. Even Matteo stepped back. That moment marked a before and after. The audience exploded. Clips of that moment went viral outside. No one could believe that a young man with no media experience had that level of self-control. People began to support him massively. Photos, videos, followers, messages. Everyone wanted Camillo to win the reality show. However, things became more difficult. The more support he received outside, the more he was attacked inside. The final stages arrived, the hardest ones. The physical challenges were almost military. The psychological tests were designed by experts to push them to the edge. And there, facing every difficulty, Camillo remembered a different teaching. Choose not to be harmed, and you won't be. Don't feel harmed, and you haven't been. He began to transform physically and mentally. His body grew strong, his mind unbreakable, his spirit untamed. Then came the last week, the final. Everything came down to 3 participants: Camillo, Matteo, and a girl named Aline, strong and strategic. The final challenges were brutal, but there was one in particular designed to break even the strongest, an isolation test. 3 full days without light, without stimuli, without a clock, without enough food, completely alone with their thoughts. That test had eliminated 2 champions from past seasons. Camillo entered the dark room and closed his eyes. "This is where my true strength will be seen," he thought. "Not against them, but against myself." The hours inside became eternal. The silence was so deep it hurt. Negative thoughts arrived like hungry beasts. "You're not enough. You don't deserve to win. You're worth nothing." Camillo felt fear crawl up his spine. His chest tightened, but then he sat down. He crossed his legs, rested his hands on his knees, and began to repeat his mantra. "The only thing I control is my mind. The only thing I own is my reaction." He spent what felt like entire days repeating that phrase. At one point, he felt as if he split, as if he were observing himself from the outside, and there he understood something that struck him like lightning. Suffering arises when you wish things were different from how they are. He breathed, accepted, surrendered, and the darkness stopped being an enemy. When the test ended, Camillo walked out slowly, but with a calm so deep that the entire production fell silent at the sight of him. Matteo came out irritated, nervous, sweating. Aline came out crying. Camillo came out as if he had looked into his own soul. The final was broadcast live. Millions of people watching, the three finalists standing in front of the audience. The host opened the envelope, and when he pronounced Camillo's name, there was a second of silence and then an explosion of applause that shook everything. Camillo lowered his head. He didn't cry out of excitement, but out of gratitude. He knew he hadn't won through physical strength, strategy, or luck. He won because, as his old book said, the greatest victory is victory over oneself. The audience chanted his name. The other participants looked at him with respect. Matteo approached, lowered his head and whispered, "I was wrong about you. You taught me what it means to be strong." Camillo hugged him without resentment. When he left the stage, he took a deep breath and looked at the sky. "Thank you for the trials," he murmured. And for the first time in his life, he felt he was the owner of his mind, the owner of his spirit, the owner of his destiny. He didn't win a reality show, he won his inner freedom. When Camillo left the studio that night, the applause was still vibrating in his chest. The production gave him a car to take him home, but he asked to walk. He needed to feel the air, the night, the silence. He needed to understand what had happened. The world had changed in an instant. Or maybe he had changed, and the world was only reflecting it. The city was lit up. Each step felt lighter, but also more overwhelming. People approached him on the street asking for photos, congratulating him, telling him how he inspired them. He smiled humbly, thanked them, but inside there was a question that wouldn't leave him alone. Will I be able to stay calm in the middle of all this noise? The reality show was hard, yes, but it was a controlled environment. Outside, the Real Challenge was just beginning. When he reached his small apartment, he opened the door slowly. Nothing had changed, except him. He turned on the light, his simple bed, his old table, his notebook filled with Stoic quotes. He picked it up, opened it, and wrote the first sentence of his new chapter. "I am not what others say I am. I am what I do today, in this moment." But only a few hours passed before the avalanche of fame fell upon him. The next day, he had hundreds of messages from brands, shows, interviews, job offers, million-dollar contracts appearing as if money grew on digital trays. Many wanted to use his image, his calm, his story. Others wanted to mold him, change him, turn him into a more commercial version. And that's where the real battle began. Camillo accepted going to his first interview. When he entered the studio, the lights hit his eyes. They asked him questions about his life, his teammates, the reality show, but soon the conversation took a turn he didn't like. "Tell me, Camillo," the host asked with a forced smile, "do you consider yourself an example for others?" Camillo felt a knot in his stomach. That word, example, weighed heavily on him. "No, I'm not an example," he answered honestly. "I'm a learner. I just tried to be better every day." The host pushed him. "But the audience sees you as an inspiration. What does it feel like to be an icon?" Camillo took a deep breath. "Don't let praise sweeten you or insults destroy you," he remembered from Seneca. "It feels like a responsibility, because I don't want people to admire me for winning a reality show, but for maintaining my integrity outside of it." The interview went viral. Many applauded him, but others began to criticize him. "Too humble, it's fake. He pretends to be wise. Fake stoic." Camillo, who had endured people screaming in his face inside the house, felt something he had never felt there: the blow of public scrutiny. Hurtful comments, digital attacks, comparisons, absurd rumors. That night, alone in his room, he felt anxiety rise in his chest. It was the first time in months that his mind didn't obey his calm. Social media was a vast ocean, and he barely knew how to swim. "Where did my strength go?" he thought as he ran his hands over his face. He spent hours staring at the screen, reading criticism, feeling as if every word ripped something out of him. Until he closed his phone, took a deep breath, and opened his old book. The page stopped on an underlined passage: "Do not allow external noise to drown out your inner peace." That phrase saved him once again. The next morning, he decided to take control. He turned off social media for a week. He rejected impulsive contracts. He only agreed to work with projects aligned with his values. Many people got upset, others called him difficult, but Camillo understood a truth the reality show had carved into his skin: if you lose your essence, you lose everything. During those days of digital silence, he decided to visit the cafe where he used to work. Customers recognized him. Some got emotional, others asked for photos. But there was something more important. He reunited with his former boss, Don Ernesto, an older man who had always spoken to him honestly. "Camillo, I'm proud of you," he said while cleaning a table. "Not for winning, but for not becoming arrogant. That's rare these days." Camillo smiled humbly. "I'm trying to remember who I am." "Don't forget it, kid. Fame doesn't change anyone. It only amplifies who they already are." That phrase echoed in his mind for days, but soon a bigger challenge arrived. A national network offered him a spot on a talk show where guests debated controversial topics. It was a huge, well-paid opportunity with high visibility. His team told him he should do it, but Camillo had doubts. He didn't want to become someone who shouted for ratings. Even so, he accepted to go to learn. On the day of the show, as he entered the set, he felt the dense atmosphere. The other guests argued, interrupted each other, attacked one another. The host told him, "Here we want you to be honest, direct, strong. If you have to argue, do it. People love conflict." When the broadcast started, one guest began to provoke him. "Camillo, you come here to talk about peace, but you only won because you had a character. No one can really be that calm." Fake laughter followed. Camillo felt his heart race. It was the same kind of provocation Matteo used in the reality show. For a second, anger wanted to take over, but Camillo breathed. He remembered, "No one provokes you without your consent." And with impressive composure, he replied, "I didn't come to argue, I came to share. You can think whatever you want. I don't control your opinion, I only control my actions." The studio fell silent. The clip went viral beyond description, this time in a positive way. People called him the man who disarms, the young man with an indestructible mind, the one who conquered himself. But with that new level of visibility came something deeper. People seeking his help. Hundreds of daily messages from people struggling with anxiety, depression, grief, breakups, fears. Everyone asked for advice, a word, guidance. Camillo felt the weight of that responsibility. Who am I to guide others? That doubt paralyzed him for days, until one night he took his notebook and wrote, "I am not a teacher, I am a fellow traveler." And within him was born the desire to create something greater than a reality show, greater than fame, greater than noise. He wanted to create a space to teach what had saved him, inner mastery. But before continuing that path, life would throw him the hardest test since leaving the reality show. One morning he received a call from his mother. Her voice was shaking. "Camillo, your brother was in an accident. He's in critical condition." The world collapsed. He ran to the hospital feeling every step as a blow to his chest. When he arrived and saw him unconscious, full of cables, machines, and wounds, he felt himself break. All his calm, all his philosophy, all his strength trembled like leaves in a storm. That night, Sitting in a cold hospital chair, he cried like he hadn't since childhood. And as he cried, he felt a deep guilt. What's the point of talking about strength if I can fall like this in a second? But at dawn, when the light came through the window, he remembered something he had read but never fully understood until that moment. You are not free to avoid pain. You are free to decide what you do with it. He wiped his tears, breathed, took his brother's hand, and whispered, I'm going to be strong for you, no matter what. That moment opened a new chapter in his life. While his brother fought to recover, Camillo took care of his family, stayed present, made difficult decisions. And there, in that painful and human process, fame stopped mattering. Headlines stopped mattering. Criticism stopped mattering. He discovered what it truly meant to be strong, to be present for those you love, without complaining, without running away, without giving up. His brother survived, but needed months of recovery. Camillo was there every day. Sometimes he slept at the hospital. Sometimes he worked with brands that respected his values. Other times he rejected huge offers because he didn't want to sell his integrity. During that time, a true purpose was born in him, to share Stoic teachings, but from experience, not from speeches. He opened a channel and uploaded his first video. He didn't talk about fame, the reality show, or victories. He talked about fear, pain, losing control, learning to let go, accepting life as it is. The video went viral. Millions watched it. Thousands commented in tears. People found in him an honest human voice, not an influencer, not a star, but a human being who had learned to be strong from the inside. And little by little, Camillo stopped being a reality show winner and became something much greater. A man who walked through life with calm, purpose, and love. Fame no longer controlled him. Ego no longer controlled him. Fear no longer controlled him. He had understood the essence of Stoicism. Freedom is not having everything. Freedom is not depending on anything. And so, in the midst of his new life, watching the sunset from a simple balcony, with his brother slowly recovering and his family proud, Camillo smiled, not because he had achieved everything, but because he had finally achieved the hardest thing of all, finding himself. Are you interested in Stoicism, personal growth, and life stories? Then subscribe and activate the bell so you don't miss any video. And don't forget to follow us on all our social networks to stay connected with our community. Join the Stoic Stories family.